Hello friends, today we will be talking about 1857, and while talking about 1857 we will be dealing predominantly with the aftermath of 1857. Now remember 1857 it signaled a catastrophic event in the history of British occupation of India. It was an event which had far-reaching implications as far as the British occupation, as far as the company's governance in India is concerned, because at one point of time during 1857 we can observe that British rule in India, the company's rule in India in the northern part of India had almost vanished. So there was a need felt by the establishment, by the British establishment, to find out causes for 1857 and to find out somebody to blame for 1857. And what came in the line of fire was the company itself. The company's rule had been categorized as misrule. The company's governance has been categorized as being greedy and as being, you see, a repressive form of governance, and therefore right after 1857 we see the Queen's Proclamation. We see the coming of the Queen's Proclamation. The Queen's Proclamation is a document written in consort with the Parliament of Britain, and there are three important points to be remembered about the Queen's Proclamation. That is, India from now on will be governed in the name of the Queen. The revenue, see, it has covered the governance part. It would be governed in the name of the Queen. The revenue would be collected in the name of the Queen. Administration will be disbursed in the name of the Queen, and also Indian Army, the Territorial Army, and also the Navy, the charge of the Territorial Army and the Navy will be taken over by the Queen. So that takes part of the governance and administration matters. Okay, and then there is another clause added to it, that is amnesty. The Queen, through the Queen's Proclamation, grants unequivocal amnesty to all the rebels of 1857. Nobody would be molested, nobody would be hanged, nobody would be killed, and there won't be any kind of prosecution for whoever had rebelled against the British government during 1857. So with the Queen's Proclamation, amnesty is granted to all the rebels of 1857. And then there is the third part, which has to do with, ruling philosophy, the philosophy of rule. Now the philosophy of rule, it is said that the Queen's Proclamation is also going to bring in a change in the philosophy of rule. India from now on will be governed fairly with the same ideas of fairness with which the Queen governs her subjects in England. India would be governed, and Indian subjects would be governed with the same ideas of fairness, and that there would be no discrimination based on caste, based on race, based on religion. Everybody would be seen equally, and governance would be dispatched in a fair manner. Alright, so these are the three most important components of the Queen's Proclamation. Of course, the Queen's Proclamation comes attached to a very important document in the history of Indian administration, and that is the Government of India Act 1858. So the Government of India Act has to do with the governance part of the Queen's Proclamation. Obviously, the Queen has taken charge of Indian governance. The Queen has done away with company's rule in India. But how is India going to be governed? The Government of India Act 1858 is going to take care of that aspect of Queen's Proclamation. Now you have to remember that the Queen's Proclamation in itself constitutes a very important mnemonic device when it comes to understanding, or when it comes to remembering the aftermath of 1857, the various policies and the various perspective changes that came after 1857. You can remember everything by the help of the Queen's Proclamation itself. So when we are talking about the governance, we already saw that there are three aspects to the Queen's Proclamation. the governance part, the amnesty part, and the ruling philosophy, or the philosophy of rule part. So, from the governance, what we can interpolate is the Government of India Act. So, from Government of India Act, we understand, okay, from the clauses of Government of India Act, we understand that the Board of Directors and the Board of Control and the Court of Directors are done away with. Companies rule in India is done away with. Now, the powers of the Court of Directors and the Board of Control will be vested upon personality and office, which is the Secretary of State for India. The Secretary of State for India will now have the power of the Court of Directors and the Board of Control. Okay, the Secretary of State for India will be concerned, predominantly concerned with the governance and everything related to matters of administration in India. Okay, and the Secretary of State for India will be assisted by the India Council. All right. So, the India Council will be an expert body of diplomats, an expert body of civil servants who will advise the Secretary of State for India in matters related to Indian governance. And the composition is in such a way that they can be seen as experts of the situation, or experts in the polity or the sociology of India. So, the composition of the India Council was made in such a way that they can be called experts in India, and these experts are going to assist the Secretary of State for India, which is a parliamentarily elected body, of course. So, Secretary of State for India will be assisted by the India Council. And then again, the Governor General from now on will be known as the Viceroy. Why the Viceroy? Because the Governor General is not just an administrative or military personnel from now on. The Governor General is in fact the deputy royalty, the representative of the royal house, the crown in India. Therefore, he is vice, that is deputy, and roy, that is royalty. Okay, he is the Viceroy of India. So, the name of the Governor General also changes to Viceroy. This takes care of the governance part, the Government of India Act, which comes in and takes away the power of government from the East India Company and gives it back to the British Queen, who will administer India with the help of the British Parliament and the Viceroy in India. Of course, it takes part of the governance aspect of Queen's Proclamation. Now, let us look into the amnesty aspect of the Queen's Proclamation. The Queen is granting amnesty to all the rebels of 1857, but what the amnesty part actually deals with is the classes of people which the amnesty part actually deals with and geared towards is the ruling classes, and the zamindari. Now, remember, the ruling classes and the zamindari, these constitutes the social classes which had provided the leadership part, which provided the leadership aspect of the 1857 rebellion. These leaders of the 1857 rebels, the rebels who had revolted against British government, the leadership came predominantly from these two classes. So, it was identified by Britain that there was something wrong, something had gone wrong, very wrong when it comes to British dealing with these two classes. And the previous perspective towards these two classes of Indian society had been one of suspicion and one of outright subjugation. So, the previous perspective and the previous policies that were formed by that perspective was one of suspicion, and it had to do with the dissolution of these two classes. But from 1857, the lesson was learned that these two classes in fact needs to be maintained, and in fact these two classes needs to be given preferential treatment, because they can form the bulwark against which the mass movements can the bulwark against which mass movement would collide and then would dissolve. These two classes would constitute the class which would act as buffer against the masses of India. It will act as buffers between the masses and the British official classes. Okay, so these two classes needs to be preserved, and preferential treatment should be reserved for these two classes. So, according to what I have already told you, it is an important mnemonic device, and from the amnesty part, from this device, from the amnesty part, you can interpolate the perspective changes that comes about when it comes to the British idea or the British notion, and which is related to the policy part also of British administration, how it gets affected by the change in perspective towards the ruling classes and the zamindari classes. So these two elements of Queen's Proclamation has been dealt with according to our mnemonic device. Now let us look at the philosophy of rule. What has been said about the philosophy of rule in the Queen's Proclamation? As I told you, the philosophy of rule would be one of fairness, would be one of a lack of distinctions, or the lack of preferential treatment towards any caste, class, or any creed. But this of course is contradictory, is a contradictory proclamation. Is a contradictory decree, in the sense that we already saw the policy has shifted towards preferential treatment towards the ruling class and the zamindari, and now preferential treatment will also be given according to one's religion, because post 1857 we see the rise of the philosophy of divide and rule. The philosophy of divide and rule has to do intimately, is connected intimately to the events of 1857. Why is it connected intimately to the events of 1857? Because of the fact that Hindus and Muslims had come together and had formed an united front against the Britishers during 1857, and they have therefore realized that these religions would have to be placed in loggerheads with each other if such a situation such as 1857 is to be prevented. These religions would have to be made to counterbalance each other, so that they cannot form a strong united front against the Britishers, and therefore divide and rule, preferential treatment based on religion, division of the the two nations which live in India. The two nation theory is also a product of 1857, which postulates that India is populated, India is not a single nation, India is populated in fact by two nations which had always been at loggerheads with each other, and now this is the rhetoric that the British administrative machinery will follow, and their policies will be dictated by this rhetoric too. Okay, so we have exhausted the 3 points of the Queen's Proclamation, and from these 3 points of the Queen's Proclamation we have interpolated what? The Government of India Act, the treatment towards the ruling classes from amnesty, that's what we draw, and from the philosophy of rule we see that philosophy of rule has now shifted to divide and rule philosophy. Alright, so this may seem to be exhaustive, to be an exhaustive description of the aftermath of 1857, but no, there is another element which we have to take into consideration, and that is the army. Now see, the revolt had begun with the army, and in fact the very first histories of the revolt which came out after 1857, that is in right after 1858, right after the proclamation of the Government of India Act, the very first histories that came out had blamed the army as being the starting point of the rebellion of 1857, and it had been realized by military commanders of Britain that the army would have to be reorganized and reconstituted. Therefore, the northern infantry, the Bengal infantry, was dissolved after 1857. The northern infantry, that is the Bengal infantry, was dissolved after 1857, and serious reorganization efforts were carried on to reconstitute the army. And how was it done? Through class company regiments, and class regiments. Now, what class company regiments and class regiments mean? Here, class denotes a particular religion or particular ethnicity. So, every company within a regiment would be in class company regiment. Every company within a regiment would be constituted of one particular class, that is one particular religion or ethnicity. In a class regiment, an entire regiment will be constituted of one single class, that is a religion or ethnicity. Now, what is the necessity for such kind of a rearrangement? This is to limit This is to limit the cohesion or the homogeneity that had come about that we can observe during 1857. The homogeneous nature of the army constituting solely of the Purbiya elements, okay, that is people from western UP and eastern Bihar, you see high caste people, high caste Brahmins and high caste Muslims, okay. That kind of a composition of the army is, you see, the British are trying to eliminate that kind of a composition of the army. Now, if a regiment is composed of several class companies, what they can do is in the event of a revolt, they can place one class against another class, so that each can shoot upon each other, okay, and there won't be any kind of inhibition when it comes to taking orders. Same is the case for class regiment. An entire class of regiment constituted of a particular ethnicity would have no qualms of conscience in shooting a regiment belonging to another class. So, this divide and rule policy, the policy of divide and rule, it also seeps into the you see the organization of the army. So, this is also an important point which you have to remember when you are dealing with the aftermath of 1857. So, this seems to be an exhaustive I see list of things, list of shifts that took place after 1857, post 1857, that is starting with the Queen's Proclamation, which is part of the Government of India Act of 1858. And as I have already explained to you, the mnemonic device, you can use it in order to interpolate the various aspects of the aftermath of 1857. I hope you would be studying hard. I hope you would do good with this. I bid you goodbye. Thank you.